The Arizona sun was a hammer against Wade Hartley's back as he urged his horse through the narrow canyon. Sweat dripped down his face, stinging his eyes. He'd been tracking Old Man Henderson's stray cattle since dawn, and the heat wasn't making it any easier. 20 years he'd been riding these red rock trails, hunting down stubborn cows that wandered off looking for better grass. 20 years of dust, heat, and solitude. He figured he'd seen just about everything these badlands had to offer. He figured wrong. The sky cracked open like God himself had split it in two. The sound hit Wade's ears a second later, a roar that made thunder seem like a whisper. His horse screamed and reared up on its hind legs. Wade gripped the reins tight, his knees clamping down hard as he fought to stay in the saddle. Years of experience kept him mounted while his heart hammered against his ribs. Something massive tore through the sky above him. It was huge, bigger than any train car he'd ever seen, trailing thick black smoke and flames that looked almost orange in the bright afternoon sun. The thing screamed as it fell, a sound that wasn't quite mechanical but wasn't quite alive either. Wade watched, frozen in his saddle, as the object slammed into the valley below with a force that shook the ground beneath his horse's hooves. Rocks tumbled down the canyon walls. Dust exploded into the air in a massive cloud that rose up like a brown wave. Wade's horse danced nervously beneath him, wanting to bolt. He should have let it run. Should have turned around right then and there, ridden straight back to town, and told Sheriff Morrison what he'd seen. Let someone else deal with whatever the hell had just fallen out of the sky. That would have been the smart thing to do. But Wade had never been accused of being overly smart. Curiosity itched at him like a burr under his saddle. He stroked his horse's neck, speaking low and calm until the animal settled. Then he turned toward the impact site and nudged the horse forward with his heels. The ride down took 15 minutes. The closer he got, the stranger things became. The air smelled wrong, sharp and metallic like when lightning struck close by. The ground was scorched black in places, and small fires still burned in the scrub brush. And then he saw it. The craft sat in a crater of its own making. It wasn't like any machine Wade had ever laid eyes on. The metal was smooth, seamless, like it had been poured instead of hammered together. Colors shifted across its surface, silver one moment, blue the next, like oil in water. No rivets. No seams he could see. Just smooth curves that seemed to shimmer and bend in the heat waves rising from the desert floor. Wade's hand dropped to his revolver as a section of the craft suddenly hissed. Steam or smoke, he couldn't tell which, poured out as a piece of the hull cracked open like an egg. His thumb found the hammer of his gun, ready to draw if needed. What stepped out made his breath catch in his throat. She was huge. Had to be at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. Her entire body was covered in scales that caught the afternoon light like polished metal, deep blue, almost sapphire, running from her head down to her feet. Actual wings folded against her back, torn and tattered, dripping silver blood that hissed when it hit the hot rocks. Her face was long and angular, more like a lizard than anything else, but her eyes were the worst part. They were gold, bright as coins, and they looked at him with an intelligence that sent ice down his spine despite the heat. She was bleeding bad. The silver fluid ran down her side, pooling at her feet. "Stay back, primitive," she snarled at him. The words were perfect English, but her voice had a strange echo to it, like two people speaking at once. "I am Lady Vera of House Corvin. I require no assistance from lower species." Wade stayed in his saddle. His hand remained on his gun, though he wasn't sure bullets would do much good against something like her. "Ma'am," he said carefully, keeping his voice level, "you're bleeding. And unless I'm mistaken, your ship there isn't going anywhere anytime soon." Vera drew herself up tall, trying to look strong and proud. But her legs shook. She took one step forward and stumbled, catching herself against the ruined craft. Pride flashed in those gold eyes, fighting against the reality of her situation. She was hurt, alone, and her ship was destroyed. Wade unhooked his canteen from his saddle. The water sloshed inside, warm but wet. "Water," he said simply and tossed it to her underhand. "Drink. Then we can discuss whether you're too good for help from a primitive." Her hand shot out and caught it so fast Wade barely saw her move. For a long moment she just stared at him. Wade stared back, waiting. Finally, slowly she unscrewed the cap and drank deep. When she lowered the canteen, something in her eyes had changed. Not softer exactly, but different. Wade nodded once. "Now then, let's see about getting you patched up before you bleed out." 3 days had passed since Wade brought Vera back to his homestead, and she still couldn't figure the man out. It was driving her crazy. His property sat at the edge of nowhere, a small wooden cabin that had seen better days, a barn that leaned slightly to one side, and a handful of chickens that wandered around pecking at the dirt. There was a well, a small corral for his horse, and not much else. By the standards of her people, the warrior race of Corvin, Wade Hartley owned absolutely nothing of value. No wealth. No status. No power. Just a patch of dry land in the middle of the desert. Yet he'd taken her in without a second thought. Hadn't asked for payment. Hadn't demanded anything in return. He'd cleaned her wounds with careful hands, stitched up the worst tears in her wings using thread and a needle, and set her up in the barn with clean hay and blankets. He brought her food 3 times a day and fresh water whenever she needed it. And the strangest part? He seemed completely unbothered by the fact that an alien warrior was sleeping in his barn. Vera stood in the shade of the barn door, watching Wade work in the morning heat. The sun was already brutal, and it wasn't even noon yet. He'd stripped down to just his pants and boots, his shirt hanging from a fence post. Sweat ran down his back as he swung the axe, splitting logs for firewood. The muscles in his arms and shoulders moved with each swing. Thump. Another log split clean down the middle. Thump. Another one. "Among my people," Vera said, her tail swishing behind her, "such kindness would be seen as weakness." Wade didn't stop swinging. Thump. "That's a damn shame," he replied, not even looking at her. Thump. "Where I come from, it's just called being decent." Vera's clawed fingers tapped against the barn door. Decent. What a strange concept. Among her people, strength was everything. You took what you needed. You proved your worth through combat and cunning. Kindness was something you showed to family, maybe, but never to strangers. Especially not to strangers who couldn't offer you anything in return. She'd spent the first 2 days studying him carefully. Her training as a scout demanded it. Know your environment. Understand the native species. Assess threats and opportunities. Wade Hartley, by all her measurements, was unremarkable. He stood just under 6 feet tall. No enhanced strength that she could detect. No natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no venom, no armor plating. His skin was soft and easily damaged. Humans were fragile creatures. Her people's research files had classified them as non-threatening. Primitive tool users. Nothing to worry about. Then she'd watched him deal with the rattlesnake. It had been the second morning. Vera was still weak from her injuries, moving slowly. She'd heard the chickens making a fuss and looked over to see Wade walking toward the coop. A thick snake was coiled near the henhouse, its tail rattling a warning. The sound made Vera's scales prickle. Even she recognized a venomous creature when she saw one. Wade didn't even break stride. His hand dropped to his hip, drew his revolver in one smooth motion and fired. The shot cracked across the desert. The snake's head disappeared in a spray of blood and the body thrashed once before going still. Wade holstered his gun, picked up the dead snake by the tail, tossed it into the scrub beyond the fence, and went right back to feeding the chickens like nothing had happened. No hesitation. No fear. Just cold, efficient action. Later that same day, Vera watched him work with his horses. One of the Maras had gotten spooked by something, probably Vera's scent, and was wild-eyed and dangerous in the corral. Wade just walked right up to her, speaking in a low, steady voice. Vera couldn't make out the words, but the tone was calm. Soothing. He put his hand on the mare's neck, stroking gently, and within minutes the horse had settled. She nuzzled against him like a pet. That evening, Vera observed him tracking a coyote that had been prowling near the chicken coop. She followed at a distance, curious. Wade moved through the rocky terrain reading signs that Vera could barely see. A disturbed pebble here, a faint paw print there, a tuft of fur caught on a thorn bush. He tracked that coyote for over a mile before finding its den. He didn't kill it. Just marked the location and headed back, making a mental note to reinforce the chicken fence. Then there was the broken water pump. One of the pipes had cracked and water was leaking everywhere. Wade didn't have the right parts to fix it properly. So he improvised. Used leather strips, wire, and a piece of tin to patch it together. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Problem solved. Vera realized something that made her scales tingle. Wade Hartley wasn't strong because of what he had. He was strong because of what he could do with what he had. Give him a problem and he'd find a solution. Change the situation and he'd adapt. Her people had advanced technology that could do almost anything. This human had an axe, a gun, and his own 2 hands. And somehow he survived. Thrived even. You're staring again, Wade said, glancing over his shoulder at her. Vera's wings twitched. Among her people, prolonged observation was the first stage of courtship. You studied a potential mate, evaluating their qualities, their strengths, their ability to provide and protect. She straightened her wings, a display posture meant to show interest and availability. You have acceptable survival skills, Vera said carefully, for a primitive. Wade just laughed and went back to chopping wood. He had no idea what she just said. No clue that she'd essentially told him he was worthy of consideration as a mate. Vera's tail lashed in frustration, sweeping through the dust. Her people were direct. Humans apparently were oblivious. She was going to have to try a different approach. I have brought you meat, Vera announced, her voice carrying that strange double echo that Wade was getting used to. He looked up from the fence post he was mending, saw Vera standing there with her wings spread slightly, and then looked down at what she'd dropped at his feet. A deer. A full-grown buck, actually, with a decent rack of antlers. Fresh killed too. The blood was still warm. Oh, thank you, Wade said, setting down his hammer and wiping his hands on his pants. Vera crossed her scaled arms over her chest, her golden eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Among my people, this is a clear declaration of intent. I am demonstrating my ability to provide for a mate. Wade blinked. Then he scratched his beard, trying to process what she just said. Right. That's real thoughtful of you. He looked at the deer again, then back at her. Intent for what exactly? Vera's eyes narrowed to slits. Her tail swept through the dust in sharp, agitated movements. Are all humans this dense, or is it just you? Wade opened his mouth to respond, to ask what the hell she was talking about, but the sound of hoofbeats cut him off. Multiple horses coming fast. His head snapped toward the sound, and everything about him changed in an instant. His hand drifted down to rest on the grip of his revolver. His shoulders squared. His eyes went hard and focused. Vera recognized that shift. She'd seen it in warriors of a dozen different species. A predator getting ready to fight. 6 riders came over the rise, kicking up dust as they approached the homestead. They spread out as they got closer, not bunched together like casual travelers. They were positioning themselves. Tactical. Dangerous. The man in front had a face like old leather, scarred and mean. A patch covered his left eye, and his remaining eye gleamed with the kind of cruelty that Vera had seen in slavers and raiders across the galaxy. He pulled his horse to a stop about 20 feet from Wade, and his 5 men fanned out on either side. Wade Hartley, the scarred man called out, his voice rough as gravel. Heard you got yourself something valuable out here. Something that fell from the sky a few days back. Wade's expression didn't change. You heard wrong, Dutch. Now get off my land. Dutch smiled, showing yellow teeth. Now Wade, don't be unfriendly. We're just here for the creature. He gestured at Vera with his chin. Scientists back east will pay a fortune for something like that. Live alien specimen? Hell, we'll be rich men. His companions laughed and murmured agreement. One of them, a thin man with a nervous twitch, already had his hand near his gun. We're giving you a choice, Dutch continued, leaning forward in his saddle. You can die defending it, or you can walk away right now. Your land, your life, nothing else has to happen here today. Vera felt her muscles coil. These primitives thought they could take her? She was a warrior of House Corvin. She'd killed things that would make these humans wet themselves in terror. She started to step forward, ready to show them exactly what happened to those who threatened her. Stay back, Wade said, his voice quiet but sharp as a knife. Vera stopped. I can handle these. Stay back. Wade didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Dutch and his men. What happened next would replay in Vera's memory for the rest of her life. Dutch's hand dropped toward his gun. Wade moved. His revolver cleared leather so fast Vera almost missed it. The first shot boomed across the desert, catching Dutch in the shoulder and spinning him sideways in his saddle. The second and third shots came before the first man even hit the ground. 2 more riders jerked and fell, one clutching his leg, the other his arm. The remaining 3 scattered, diving off their horses and scrambling for cover behind rocks and the fence posts. But Wade was already moving. He didn't just stand there like a target. He rolled left, came up behind his own fence and fired twice more. One shot kicked up dust next to a man's head, making him yelp and stay down. Another shot hit a gun as a rider tried to aim, sending the weapon spinning into the dirt. The nervous thin man popped up to return fire. Wade shot the hat clean off his head. The man froze, eyes wide with terror, and dropped his gun. Next one goes lower, Wade called out, his voice steady as stone. The last man standing, a big fellow with a thick beard, made a run for his horse. Wade let him go, tracking him with his gun until the man was mounted and riding hard away from the homestead, leaving his companions behind. Rest of you stay down, Wade ordered. He moved forward, gun trained on each man in turn, and kicked their weapons away. Dutch was groaning, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Wade checked each man methodically, making sure none of them had hidden guns or knives. Then he tied their hands with rope from the barn. "You got two choices," Wade said to Dutch, his voice cold as winter. "You can ride out of here and never come back, or I can drag you to town and let the sheriff deal with you. Either way, if I see any of you on my land again, I won't aim for shoulders next time." Dutch nodded, his face pale with pain and fear. Wade cut him loose, along with the others, and watched as they limped to their horses and rode away, casting fearful glances back over their shoulders. Only when they were gone, when the dust had settled and silence returned to the homestead, did Wade's hands start to shake. He holstered his gun and let out a long breath that seemed to carry all the tension out of his body. His fingers trembled as he ran them through his hair. "You're afraid," Vera observed, stepping closer. Wade looked at her and gave a tired smile. "I'm alive. Fear keeps you sharp. The moment you stop being afraid is the moment you get careless." Vera studied him with new eyes. "You fought for me. Risked your life for mine." Wade shrugged like it was nothing. "You needed help. Simple as that." But it wasn't simple. Not to Vera. Among her people, such a display of combat skill and protective instinct was the highest form of courtship ritual. A warrior proved their worth by defending what mattered to them. Wade hardly didn't understand it, but he'd just proven himself worthy by every measure her culture valued. "Human," Vera said, her voice carrying a new intensity that made Wade look up. "We need to discuss something important." That night, Wade sat on a hay bale in the barn, watching Vera pace back and forth like a caged animal. Her claws clicked against the wooden floor with each step. Her tail swept through the air in agitated arcs. The lantern hanging from a nail cast dancing shadows across her blue scales, making them shimmer in the dim light. "You don't understand," Vera said, her voice tight with frustration. She spun to face him, her wings flaring slightly. "Among my people, I am considered exceptional. Not just good. Exceptional. I am a warrior scholar. Do you know what that means?" Wade shifted on the hay bale. "Can't say I do. It means I have trained in combat since I was old enough to hold a weapon. It means I have studied the sciences, the histories, the languages of 100 different species. I have traveled to 73 worlds across this galaxy. I have mapped star systems. I have negotiated treaties between species that wanted to tear each other apart. I am sought after by nobles and military commanders. My lineage is pure. My accomplishments are recognized across 3 sectors of space." "Sounds impressive," Wade said carefully, not sure where this was going. Vera's golden eyes blazed in the lamplight. "Yet here, on this backwater planet in the middle of nowhere, a human who owns nothing but a small plot of dirt treats me as if I am just anyone. Just another person. You feed me like I am a stray dog. You tend my wounds like I am injured livestock. You ask nothing of me. Expect nothing from me." She stepped closer, her voice rising. "Why do you not pursue me? I have made my intentions clear. The hunting gift. The displays of strength. The constant observation of your qualities. These are not casual gestures among my people. They are courtship rituals." Wade blinked. His mind went blank for a second as her words sank in. Wait, you mean?" "Yes." Vera's tail thrashed, knocking over an empty bucket. The sound echoed through the barn. "I have been courting you for days, human. Since the moment you proved yourself capable. Since you showed me kindness without expecting anything in return. Since you defended me against those raiders. I have been trying to show you that I find you worthy." Wade stood up slowly. His face felt hot, and he was grateful for the dim light that hid his embarrassment. "Ma'am? Miss Vera? I think you got the wrong idea about me." He took off his hat and twisted it in his hands, a nervous habit from his youth. "I'm just a drifter. A hired hand. I got a cabin and some land, sure, but it ain't even really mine. I'm just watching it for the bank until they find someone to buy it proper. I got no money. No family. No prospects." He gestured around the modest barn. "This is it. This is all I got. A broken-down barn, a tired horse, and some chickens that barely lay eggs anymore. I got nothing to offer someone like you. Someone who's traveled the stars and done great things. I'm just nobody." "Nothing to offer?" Vera stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost dangerous. "You saved my life when you could have left me to die in that canyon. You gave me shelter in your home when you owed me nothing. You shared your food and water when you have little to spare. You faced 6 armed men to protect me, knowing you might die." She paused, her breathing heavy. "Do you know how many species I have studied? How many worlds I have catalogued and analyzed?" "Can't say I do." "Hundreds," Vera said quietly. I have walked on planets covered in crystal forests. I have swum in oceans that glow in the dark. I have stood in cities that reach into the clouds. I have met beings that live for thousands of years. Creatures that can bend metal with their minds. Species so advanced they build machines the size of moons. Her golden eyes locked onto his. And in all that time, across all those worlds and all those species, you know what I have never found? A people who give a damn about anyone but themselves. Every species I have encountered looks out for their own first, last, and always. They form alliances based on profit. They show kindness only when it benefits them. They help others only when there is something to gain. She moved closer still until she was standing right in front of him. But humans? You look at impossible odds and say, try anyway. You lose everything and still wake up the next morning and keep going. You help people you will never see again. You give to those who cannot repay you. That is not common, Wade. That is rare. That is precious. Wade shifted his weight uncomfortably. That ain't special. That's just what you do. When you see someone who needs help, you help them. That's how it should be. Exactly, Vera said softly, and suddenly she sounded tired. That is just what you do. Do you understand how rare that is? How valuable? Most species do not think that way. But humans do. You do. She sat down on the hay beside where he'd been sitting, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked small. Vulnerable. Her wings drooped, and her tail curled around her feet. I'm stranded here, Wade. My people are nomadic. We do not stay in one place. They will not return to this sector of space for at least 30 years. Probably longer. I am alone. Truly alone for the first time in my life. The vulnerability in her voice made something twist in Wade's chest. He knew that feeling. Knew it better than he wanted to admit. He'd felt it every day for the past 6 years, ever since the fever came through and took his wife and little girl. He'd known it in every town he drifted through, never staying long enough to make friends, never letting anyone get close. Always moving. Always alone. I've been alone too, Wade admitted quietly. He sat down beside her, the hay rustling under his weight. After I lost my family to sickness, I figured maybe I was meant to be that way. Alone. Some people are made for families and communities. Some people are made to drift. I thought I was the drifting kind. And now? Vera asked, turning her head to look at him. Wade looked at this impossible creature sitting beside him. An alien warrior from the stars who'd crashed into his life and somehow decided he was worth something. Someone who'd traveled across the galaxy and seen wonders he couldn't even imagine, and yet she'd chosen to stay here. With him. In this broken-down barn in the middle of the Arizona desert. Now, he said slowly, I'm starting to think maybe I've been wrong. Maybe I've just been too scared to try again. Vera moved closer. Her scaled hand reached out carefully, slowly, and took his calloused, work-roughened hand in hers. Her touch was warm, gentle. I came to your world by accident, she said softly. But I stayed. That is becoming a choice. My choice. They sat in silence, two lonely souls from different worlds, discovering that loneliness speaks a language everyone understands. 2 months had passed since the incident with Dutch and his gang. 2 months of Wade teaching Vera about human life, about fixing fences and tending animals and surviving in the harsh desert. 2 months of them growing closer in ways neither of them had expected. And then, on a clear morning when the sky was nothing but endless blue, everything changed. The ship appeared without warning. One moment the sky was empty. The next, something massive was descending through the clouds, blocking out the sun. It was sleek and silver, nothing like the broken wreck that Vera had crashed in. This one moved with purpose, landing smoothly in the open ground beyond Wade's property. Vera stood in the yard, her scales catching the morning light. Wade stood beside her, his hand resting near his gun out of habit, though he knew bullets wouldn't do much against a ship like that. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. They both knew what this meant. The ship's door opened with a hiss of steam, and a ramp extended to the ground. The figure that emerged looked similar to Vera, blue scales, wings, that same regal bearing, but smaller, leaner. Her scales were darker, almost navy blue, and her eyes were a sharp green instead of gold. Lady Vera, the newcomer said, her voice carrying that same double-tone quality. She stopped at the bottom of the ramp, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. We received your distress beacon. We came as soon as we could. Her words died as her gaze landed on Wade, then back to Vera. You are, with a human? Vera's posture straightened, and Wade recognized the defensive stance she'd taken when they first met. His name is Wade, she said firmly. Wade Hartley. The other woman, Vera had mentioned her cousin once, stared at Wade like he was some kind of curiosity in a museum. We can depart immediately. The council will want a full report on your crash, and the healers will need to examine your injuries. I have already prepared your quarters on the ship and, she stopped mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing. Wait. Are those human clothes you're wearing? Vera looked down at herself. Wade had modified some of his spare clothes to fit her larger frame, a simple work shirt and canvas pants. They were practical, comfortable, and much better suited to desert life than the torn remains of her flight suit had been. They're practical, Vera said simply. Lisa's expression shifted to something between confusion and concern. Cousin, what happened here? What has this human done to you? He saved my life, Vera replied. And I learned something. Something important. Learned what? What matters? More of Vera's people emerged from the ship. Crew members, Wade figured, all of them staring at the strange scene before them. Their voices rose in that strange double-tone language, too fast for Wade to catch any meaning, but the tone was clear enough. They were arguing. About Vera. About him. About what all of this meant. One of them, a large male with silver-tipped scales, gestured angrily at Wade. Lisa tried to calm him, but the argument grew louder. Wade caught words here and there: primitive species, house obligations, status, unheard of. They were trying to convince Vera to leave. To come back to her people and forget about the human she'd spent 2 months living with. Wade listened to it all, his jaw tight, his mind working through what he knew had to happen. Finally he spoke up, his voice cutting through the alien conversation. She should go. Vera spun around so fast her tail nearly knocked over the water bucket beside the well. What? Wade met her golden eyes, his expression calm even though his heart was pounding. You got a whole universe out there waiting for you. Your people. Your life. Your responsibilities. I can't ask you to give all that up for. He gestured at the homestead around them, the small cabin, the leaning barn, the handful of chickens pecking in the dirt. For this. For a life in the middle of nowhere with a nobody. You're not asking, Vera said, stepping close to him. Her voice was low, dangerous. I am choosing. Lisa's green eyes widened. Choosing? Cousin, you cannot be serious. What could this primitive backwater possibly offer you? You have status, power, recognition, a future among our people. Here you have nothing. Vera looked at Wade for a long moment. Then she turned back to Lisa and the assembled crew. I have mapped star systems that you will never see. I have documented 1,000 species across 73 worlds. I have watched empires rise and crumble into dust. I have stood before the council and advised military commanders on strategies that saved millions of lives. She reached out and took Wade's hand in hers. The gesture was gentle, intimate. But I never had a home. Never had someone who looked at me and saw just Vera. Not Lady Vera of House Corvin. Not a warrior to be utilized or a scholar to be consulted or a prize to be won. Just me. The person underneath all the titles and accomplishments. You're staying? Lisa asked, and she sounded genuinely shocked. Here? With him? I'm staying, Vera confirmed. Wade finally allowed himself to smile. He squeezed her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with her scaled ones. You sure about this? It's gonna be a hard life. Hot summers. Cold winters. More dust and dirt than you can imagine. No fancy technology. No exciting adventures across the galaxy. Vera's golden eyes sparkled with something that looked almost like amusement. Human, I have seen easy. Easy is boring. Easy as every other world I have visited. This. She gestured at the desert around them. This is interesting. She turned back to Lisa. I will need supplies from the ship before you leave. Medical equipment. Fabrication tools. Communication devices in case of emergency. Consider it my severance from House Corvin. Lisa looked like she wanted to argue more, but something in Vera's expression stopped her. She sighed, her wings drooping slightly. The council will not be pleased with this decision. The council has managed without me before, Vera replied. They will manage again. I have found something here that is rarer than any scientific discovery I have ever made. Someone worth staying for. The crew unloaded crates of equipment over the next hour. Technology that Wade couldn't begin to understand, all of it neatly packed and labeled in that alien script. Lisa gave Vera one last long look before boarding the ship, shaking her head like she couldn't believe what was happening. As the ship lifted off, its engines humming with power, Wade and Vera stood together in the yard, watching it climb into the sky and disappear among the stars. She had given up everything, her status, her people, her place in the galaxy, for a life in the Arizona desert with a man who had nothing to offer but himself. You know, Wade said thoughtfully, watching the last glimmer of the ship vanish, folks in town are gonna have a lot of questions when they see you. Vera's tail wrapped around his leg, a gesture he'd learned was one of affection among her people. Let them ask their questions. I have traveled across the cosmos and met beings from 100 worlds. I think I can handle a few curious humans in a small town. Wade laughed. It was a real laugh, deep and genuine, and it felt strange because he couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that. Not in years. Not since before he'd lost everything and decided he was meant to be alone. Two impossible beings who had found each other in the most impossible of circumstances. An alien warrior and a drifting cowboy, proving that home isn't about where you come from or what you own. It's about who you choose to be with. The sun set red over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of them felt alone.